Where the heck am I going, man? Hey, do you cactuses know where I'm supposed to go? You don't know either? Okay. How about you? Man. And there's barely a path this way. Do any of you cactuses know where I'm supposed to be going? That is not helpful. Hey, Larken Rose here, in the middle of nowhere. Tired and sweaty from walking a billion miles. Thought I'd do another random video in the middle of nowhere. So, the concept of paradigms and how people think in all sorts of different contexts it directly relates to people's inability to actually be objective in their beliefs about anything. A lot of people have these underlying assumptions, these underlying premises, whatever, close enough, that they don't look at and they can't question and they don't know how to think outside of. So, and I see this constantly, but a thing reminded me of it yesterday where somebody was pushing one political slant or another. I forget which one. And I criticized it, shockingly. And he said, well, what's your political platform? And I said, I don't want any rulers. I don't want any political masters, not the psychopaths you vote for, not the psychopaths you vote against. And he responded with something like, you could just say you don't know. It's like, I do know. I don't want either one of them. And I sort of bluntly said, I expect you to literally not be able to comprehend the idea of not wanting a master at all. And then he responded with something even more incoherent. I don't even remember what it was. But that's how a lot of people talk. And that is why so many people, when they hear somebody suggest not having a ruling class, they say, well, what's your solution? My solution to what? There's one thing I'm saying, don't believe in this because it's ridiculous and irrational and bogus and immoral and heinously destructive, which is the concept of authority, which isn't real. Well, what would you do instead? Instead of what? What I would do instead of believing something stupid and insane is don't believe something stupid and insane. And it's the equivalent of, sorry if this is a spoiler for anybody, it's the equivalent of me saying, there's no such thing as Santa Claus, and somebody saying, well, then what's your master plan for how we should handle Christmas? It's like, I didn't appoint myself Christmas czar. I'm not in control of those things. I don't want to be in control of those things. I'm not suggesting a master plan. I'm describing one thing that isn't. But people are so accustomed to thinking inside the paradigm of a political master plan of what does the ruling class say it will do for us. They literally can't comprehend no master plan. To them, that's mayhem and chaos. Just like slaves, if slavery is all they've known their entire lives, the idea of being free is actually scary because, well, what plantation will we work on? Well, either you get to choose or maybe you won't even be on a plantation. But who will feed us? Just when people don't have exercise thinking in that direction, their responses don't make any sense because they've never thought about it, and their paradigm doesn't allow for the idea of, wait, so you mean we're just people acting like people? Yeah, just that. And people can organize in a million ways, and I'm not going to be in charge of that. People can cooperate in a million ways, and I'm not going to be in charge of that. And neither are you. You're going to be in charge of you. I'm going to be in charge of me. 7-8 billion other people are going to be in charge of themselves. Some of them will be buttheads. Some of them will be violent. Other ones will have to defend against them. Bad things will sometimes happen. But the idea of a master plan that fixes everything is built into statism because you can't, I mean, why would anybody vote to have somebody in a position over themselves unless they were super scared that, well, there needs to be somebody in charge? And a lot of people will say it like that. Well, somebody has to be in charge. Of what? Of you? Well, no, things. Who's going to run the country? And you'll see people ask that. It's like, what do you think running the country even means? When you go to the grocery store, does Donald Trump or Congress run the grocery store? No. Lots of people who are there voluntarily and engaged in voluntary trade run the grocery store. Okay, so you get food without needing a ruling class. Nobody needed to run that by way of political power. But the fact that these things everybody sees on a daily basis on their own doesn't change the fact that they're so stuck in the paradigm of statism that they think the country needs to do. So there has to be somebody in charge of the country. Why? Why would you think that? And why on earth would you think that's a good idea? And so it's funny how people assume that what I say and what other voluntarists say, it must fit in the mold of a master plan. We must be describing, well, here is how everything will work. It doesn't. I'm literally describing one thing I wish people would stop believing in and then be themselves and run their own lives. Not come to me and bow down to me and let me tell them how to do anything. That's just the same problem as before, but people can't think outside that paradigm. I'm actually starting on a new book that describes things from a different angle, but it kind of amounts to the same thing. Actually, the thing that inspired me for this particular thing was watching the movie Apocalypto again, which is dreadfully heinous and horrible, and awesome and profound, about the tribes down in South America getting taken over by the Aztecs and all the slavery and violence and conquest and human sacrifice and all that nasty stuff. So it's a nasty, horrible movie, and it's awesome, and it's profound. And I often talk about being optimistic precisely because most of humanity looks at that sort of thing and goes, that's not okay. That's progress, and that is huge progress in what, relatively speaking, is a very tiny amount of time. All that is, and this is going to be the theme of my new book, is basically, I still haven't thought of a title, the evolution of humanity into what humanity should be. And we're not nearly there, but we've made lots of progress from the days of, hey, if you don't look like me or don't sound like me or you live in the next valley over, yeah, I'm going to kill you and take your stuff. So, evolving empathy to the point where we start, and empathy really is, like, empathy is the instinctive, emotional side of it, of like, I don't want to suffer, and for some reason, I don't want that person to suffer either. Even if I don't know them, I still don't want them to suffer. That's weird. And that's a strangely human trait. I mean, there are some animals that kind of demonstrate that too, some other animals. But just the emotional side of empathy of, I don't want other people suffering. So I don't want to inflict suffering on them. I don't want to see somebody else inflicting suffering on them. That's the gut level, emotional, instinctive level. And then the philosophical, intellectual is just description of the same thing, is self-ownership. Like, I own me and you own you. I don't have the right to force anything on you without your consent. I don't have the right to murder you or steal your stuff. Or that's just sort of intellectualizing. It's the wrong word, but whatever. It's just sort of putting into logical, philosophical terms the gut level thing of empathy. And the progress that humanity has made in that has been massive. And I could run down the list. I'm not going to go over what I've gone over a billion times before of how women used to be treated everywhere, and they still are in some places. How children used to be treated everywhere, and they still are in some places. How races used to treat each other, how religions used to treat each other, and they still are in some places. But in a lot of the world, people are like, I don't care what you sound like and look like you have rights too. Now, statists are constantly trying to mess with that and constantly trying to counteract the evolving empathy in the human race. So they have to push division. They have to push hatred. They have to play all the stupid games like Trump is doing with illegal aliens, and like every politician always does, make you scared of somebody else so that you'll cheer for the ruling class to go get them. They didn't used to have to play those tricks. They would just say, hey, that tribe in the next valley over has lots of good stuff. Let's go kill them and take their stuff. Yay! You didn't have to like manipulate and trick people, because a lot of the human race wasn't evolved to the point of going, yeah, but they're people. I don't want to do that to them. Even if I don't know them, I don't like that. And, you know, at this point, it's kind of impossible to tell, like watching Apocalypto, it's impossible to tell like exactly how many of the human beings, because they were people involved in that, were watching and going, this is horrible. And how many were like, whatever. And how many were like, this is horrible, but I don't dare to do anything about it. Like, we can't magically read their minds now. But the evolution of humanity is literally just getting to the point where we see other people where, I mean, not to get religious, but love thy neighbor as thyself. Do unto others as you would have done unto you. And the better version, don't do unto others as you don't want them doing unto you. Which a lot of faiths phrase it in the negative, which I think is actually better than the positive. Ow, my leg is breaking because I'm kneeling on a rock, just to be super uncomfortable. But it's such a basic thing, and so many people are stuck inside the political paradigm that they can't comprehend that what I'm saying has nothing to do with a new political system. And the fact that there's an ism on the end of voluntarism or anarchism, a lot of people say, well, all these isms are just control, blah, blah, blah. Well, this one isn't. Maybe it shouldn't have that as the suffix of the word, but it's literally just describing the absence of one really bad idea. It's not describing the solution for anything. Now, voluntarism, the term voluntarism has built into it the solution of all human interaction should be voluntary, which, you know, goes quite well with understanding, hey, I don't want him to oppress me. Maybe I shouldn't oppress him. Because if I do, I'm a total hypocrite. If we all sort of behave this way to each other and don't commit aggression, A, things work better, and B, we don't like suffer and constantly violently battle over everything under the sun. And so that, to me, and I've said it this way before, I think humanity is very close to being born into what humanity should be, where it's just obviously accepted by most people that, yeah, you don't commit aggression against others. And the funny thing is, most people already think they believe that because humanity has evolved this far, but then you get political psychopaths and megalomaniacs who have to teach them, okay, mostly you should get along, but if we do these weird rituals and you vote for us and we have constitutions and we do these legislative things, then suddenly you don't need empathy. You don't need to treat other people as equal because we magically have the right to rule. And then you get to vote for us to rob your neighbor, but that doesn't count as you robbing them. It's not bad anymore because it's legal and that's the system we have and yada, yada, yada. But the fact that humanity needed to be taught all this political mythology bullshit to get them to keep supporting violence against their neighbor is actually a really good sign. I mean, it's not a good sign that it worked so well, but it's a good sign that they needed to do it at all because it shows that lots and lots of people now naturally don't want that. Like the propaganda they have to feed to the military to make them shoot at complete strangers is because the average person, at least the average American, if you say, here's a gun, shoot that guy, he's going to go, why? Who is he? What did he do? Instead of, yes, sir, right away, sir. Unless they're trained to be unthinking automatons, which is what boot camp is for, like openly and obviously. But it's so weird how often talking about these things, almost every statist responds, and almost every statist thinks this, which is why they say it. They think, oh, so this is some new central plan that we're all going to go along with. No, it isn't. You're going to be in charge of you. And the fact that that is so difficult for most people to comprehend and even think about is weird, and literally comprehend, because so many of their responses show that they didn't even get the point. They don't respond by arguing with what I said. They respond by arguing with stuff they just randomly imagined because their brains can't process the idea of not having a master. Oh, you just think it's every man for himself? Why on earth would it mean that? No, right now, voluntarily, it's not every man for himself. People trade, people cooperate, people organize in a billion different ways. Why on earth would you jump to every man for himself? Mad Max, from nobody has the right to commit aggression against somebody else. But it's just because it is a fundamentally different paradigm, and most people really have trouble thinking in different paradigms. But the reason I want to write this book, which will probably be a pretty short thing, but write it from the side of empathy, and eventually it gets around to tying it into political philosophy, but it's really just the evolution of humanity into figuring out, yeah, we should probably treat our neighbor as ourselves. And that shows up in religious teachings, but I think it's also just sort of an evolution of the human spirit, not to get too woo-ish. But that's been going on for many years now, and the fact that so many people are like, we don't think it's abolitionists going, we don't think it's okay to own people. And other people going, they might have a point. And people saying, we don't think it's okay to slaughter those people because they believe in a different God. And that's a relatively new development in humanity. And that's reason for optimism. And the fact that right now the BS tricks of the psychopaths continue to work on a bunch of people doesn't change the fact that they have to do those tricks. They still have to go to great lengths to demonize and play all these stupid games because normal people acting on their own don't want to do that. I mean, some do. There are psychopaths and there's some nasty people, and I'm not going to talk them out of being nasty. But most people don't want to cheer for if somebody just says, hey, give me a gun and I'll go rob your neighbor and give you some money. Most of them are going to say, no, what's wrong with you? But if they say, elect me and I will enact tax policies that allow for a more fair distribution of, in other words, the exact same thing using different words. And they go, well, if it's legal and it's government and it's done by way of these weird rituals that you convinced us are actually legitimate, okay, let's do that. And so, but underneath that is still I was going to say slow evolution, but in the grand scheme, it's really fast that people are getting to the point where they're like, maybe everybody is somebody. Maybe people are people who don't look like me and don't sound like me and came from a different place and believe different things. Maybe women are people even. Maybe children are people. Maybe we shouldn't aggress against any people. And, it's kind of, from our vantage point, we can go, why on earth did it take that long for people to notice that? But it did. But then they did. And most people did. And so it's why I'm optimistic even while insanity continues, because now the insanity isn't just, hey, let's get together and violently attack those people. It has to be 99% manipulation and fear-mongering and divisive lunacy and all that, because most people want to get along. And that, I know that can be hard to believe if you're seeing two groups of political idiots screaming at each other, our guy should be on the throne, no, our guy should. It's like, if you take away the myth of government, most of those people would get along just fine. So yeah, there's reason to be optimistic. And I'm going to optimistically end this video before a mountain lion eats me and start to head back, hopefully before the sun goes down. If this is found footage, I hope you enjoyed my last video. I think I'll live.